I get it. You're wondering how or even why I'm using an iPhone, let alone reviewing it. I come from a long history with Android as my daily driver, but let me make one thing clear. I don't have any allegiances to any one operating system. Just because I've made a career of talking about one particular operating system doesn't mean I'm closed-minded. I've actually used iPhones in the past, and I have said on multiple occasions that it is a perfectly fine ecosystem. It's got quirks, but it's undeniably accessible and useful for just about anyone. What really matters is what you need from your phone, but no matter where you lie on the spectrum, you owe it to yourself to give the new iPhones a proper look. This is Pocket Now, and I am Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? And this is my review of the iPhone XS Max, brought to you by Wix. I have the Max edition because I'm a glutton for monetary punishment. Okay, jokes aside, I thought it would be a good idea to get the version that is the most different from previous generations, especially compared to the iPhone X. And compared to its non-S predecessor, the phone retains much of the original's look and feel. I have the gold edition that might be closer to rose gold than anything else, because this backing evokes more of a peach or pink shade rather than the rich shine that is better found on the sides. In keeping with the 10, there is no home button, no fingerprint reader, no headphone jack, and that notch is up top. Speaking of which, it's definitely all Face ID now for biometrics with no foreseeable return of the fingerprint reader. Thankfully, it is fast enough to be reliable, even if putting on a hat confused it a couple of times. So it's an iPhone X blown up to a bigger size. For the most part, that means good things for people who want even more screen. 6.5 inches on this AMOLED screen is cut a little bit by that notch, but even if you're not a fan of the extra bits up top, you have to admit that this is a lot of screen. It also means that the phone might not be the easiest to handle for some people. Let's face it, gone are the days of the small flagship phone. I'm still stubborn enough to try and balance the phone on my pinky, and when using the phone in my right hand, it's just a chore to reach the other side, either to hit the back button or to swipe to go backward. Reachability is still here and easily triggered now by swiping down on the bottom bar, and I've had to lean on that more than I've expected. Watching all forms of media is great on this big screen even when the notch slightly cuts into the content. It never actually gets in the way though, so I can essentially look past it. YouTube, Netflix, HBO, even Instagram feeds look pretty great on this display that is just shy of Quad HD resolution. I have played a lot of mobile games new and old on this phone already too. The latest release by Nintendo, for example, Dragalia Lost, is a colorful and vivid game that shines through, and thank goodness it's easy to play with one hand. Fast. I have to admit, iOS is fast on this phone. I've always known that iOS is Spartan-made, but having used this phone exclusively as my daily driver since the phone was released, I can feel the optimization of Apple's operating system getting better thanks to the Bionic A12. This 7nm process is making its mark on the performance aspect, and thus moving around the operating system is an absolute breeze, even if to me it's not the most exciting part of this phone. After all, once you get past the operating system, it's all about the apps, right? The App Store has been my second home lately because there is an unfortunate truth about the app gap between iOS and Android. Simply put, there are some apps on iOS that never make it to Android, and sometimes you really wish they did. I have yet to find an experience that is so exclusive to iOS though that I would get app envy on an Android phone. But I have to mention that while many iOS apps are a high point of the experience, this Google guy appreciates how all of the familiar applications have been faithfully brought to the iPhone. I just couldn't get away from Google Calendar and Google Maps in particular. And then there are the cameras. Not too much has changed on the external side when it comes to the rear cameras. Instead, there's the inclusion of Smart HDR, which works to make sure every shot is well exposed due to multi-frame processing. Still, you get dual 12-megapixel cameras with a normal focal length and then a telephoto 2x zoom. Apple continues to do well in the automatic shooting department. These new iPhones even shoot when you're not hitting the shutter button, so when you do hit the trigger, there's no lag. This enhancement is definitely palpable. Compared to the Galaxy Note 9 that takes a little longer to release the shutter in some cases, the iPhone is quite literally a snap. It is also the same auto camera that most people can rely on. Those seeking more control can download one of the many camera apps in the App Store, but at least in the main app you can just hit the button and Smart HDR will try to make the shot as good as possible. That will mean different things to different people though. A couple things are obvious. Apple doesn't go too far with the saturation on its photos, and Smart HDR can roughly translate to less contrast. It does some real work on the shadows, and if you're trying to capture a more contrasted scene, you might have to remember to turn off the HDR. Portrait mode returns with the portrait lighting effects coming out of beta, but how they turn out is up to your personal tastes. The lines are still a bit of a hit or miss situation, and aside from contour lighting, I don't really see many of these effects being used in a practical daily sense. What has been added is a depth slider that can customize the bokeh blur effect. It works well enough as long as your subject is defined when shooting, but it is trying very hard to emulate a real aperture effect. Cranking the perceived aperture setting could make more of the scene blurred out than you would like. Now, as a vlogger, video recording is actually a highlight of this phone, even if some manual controls would have been more than appreciated. What I can say is that the slow motion mode in particular includes 120 frames per second recording, which I love. Many phones are moving to 240 outright for slow-mo, and that introduces a lot of flicker from incandescent lighting. It's great to have the option between both. I also noticed that the focus doesn't jump around a ton while shooting, and the auto exposure is smooth enough to not be jarring when it's changing. However, the white balance can go a bit crazy depending on your scene. Taking the step to lock the focus and exposure can go a long way with video here. Finally, the front-facing camera. Yes, there seems to be some smoothing going on when taking portrait mode shots, which some people will like and others will hate. I think it's basically coming down to whether or not you like the beauty modes that can be found in Android phones. Really, this move doesn't come off as really all that strange to me, considering half the world loves their beauty modes and their beauty apps. But here in the West, we tend to prioritize detail over airbrushing, so I get where the reactions are coming from. Okay, so far this outlines the mostly positive experience I've had with the iPhone XS Max, but not everything that shines is gold. Let's talk about the price. Yes, this is the expensive version of this year's iPhones, and that will be a hard pill for some to swallow. It's not overpriced because of the phone itself, though. If the overall experience is to be measured, it is a top-tier smartphone and definitely the best that Apple has ever made. But what you get with the phone is simply not enough. Take audio, for example. You get earpods in the case, but no adapter for your existing, probably better headphones. And if you want to get what is considered the quintessential Apple audio experience, you'll have to shell out even more money for the wireless AirPods. Battery life is perfectly fine with the XS Max. In fact, I have been able to get pretty much all of my days through without having to break out the power bank. And wireless charging is easy to lean on. But you get a regular charger and cable in the box, with the fast charger bits requiring even more money. Compare this to other smartphones that come with arguably better in-box headphones and many that come with fast chargers, not to mention any other accessories that make the iPhone unboxing experience now feel much more sterile and emptier than it used to. If you're going to pay the most to get the best, Apple seems to believe that the phone alone justifies it. And honestly, that's the hard part, figuring out if the somewhat larger battery and the larger screen are worth the premium. Our own Brandon Miniman outlined it in his video. The screen is not used to its full potential outside of media consumption. There are no multitasking options or dual windows that take advantage of all that real estate, and even iOS itself feels a little blown up just to fit the space. And finally, I just have to mention one final thing about iOS. It is a perfectly capable operating system, but I can't help but feel that it's just a little bit boring. I get it, it is accessible to literally all users, and I myself am in a privileged position in that I can use and thus compare both iOS and Android. But the feeling I can't quite shake about iOS on the daily is that the way I use this phone is the way that many other people, maybe even everyone else, uses it. I have tried to get some customization in there in the ways that I could, but maybe one day we'll get a version of this operating system that puts a bit more personalization power in the hands of the user. This collaboration between JV and Pocketnow has a backbone, pocketnow.com, where you can get a ton of news and commentary via the written word. It's been around for a long time, and much of that work could have been made easier by the tools found at Wix. If you're looking to make your own website, easy drag and drop tools and hundreds of templates from the geniuses over at Wix make it easy. You don't even have to have any coding experience. Just bring your creativity and Wix will help you do the rest. Find out more about Wix, the powerful website builder and host, in the links in the description down below. And so there you have it, a phone that is as easy to love as it is to hate, because it is one of the speediest, most reliable, easiest smartphone experiences you can have, while simultaneously asking even more of you, and maybe your wallet, if you find yourself wanting more. If you have the iPhone X, you might not find enough to really pull that $1,100 minimum out of your pocket. If you are using an earlier iPhone, the new line is a compelling prospect. And finally, if you're coming from any other phone, this is the competition, and it is fierce in multiple ways. I outlined in a video on my own channel the types of users this phone might be for, so you can check that out over at youtube.com/Joshua Vergara. We have more on the iPhone XS and XS Max coming in the following days, so stay tuned for that and subscribe to both of our channels so that you can keep up with all that is on its way. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I really appreciate all of you being as open-minded with me in this review as I have been with my experience of the iPhone. There's really not a whole lot for me to complain about with this phone. There are just a couple of things that I can't really shake, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a really premium device, both in price but also in experience. Keep it tuned to Pocket Now and also check out my channel as well. You can find both of those links available right now and in the description down below, so you can keep up with everything iPhone and even more, because there's a lot coming in the coming weeks. So you have a lot to look forward to, and I will see you on the next one.